Hello guys, close your eyes and imagine yourself in another time, in another world. It's a chilly early morning in the winter of 1916, and you find yourself standing in a narrow trench cut into the earth. The sky above is still dark, just beginning to hint at dawn far on the horizon. The air is cold and damp, and you can see your breath as a faint mist in the dim light. All around you is quiet, with only the soft rustling of a tired soldier's feet in the mud and the distant low rumble of artillery far away. We're about to take a slow, gentle journey back in time to the Great War, World War I, and explore why it absolutely sucked to be a soldier living in these trenches. We'll do it calmly and honestly, letting the stories and the moments speak softly for themselves. Before we begin our stroll through history, I invite you to get comfortable. Maybe you're snuggled up under warm blankets right now, listening to my voice as you wind down. If you find this quiet history helpful in soothing your mind, please feel free to gently tap the like button and consider subscribing to join us on more of these peaceful journeys through the past. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach. Now, with your eyes closed and your mind calm, picture that trench again. It's just before dawn in early 1916 on the Western Front. You are a young soldier, one of thousands spending night and day in this maze of mud and earth. The trench walls around you are made of packed dirt, reinforced with sandbags and wooden planks. They glisten with moisture, slimy with mud and condensation. In places, the walls seep water, and little rivulets trickle down into puddles at your feet. The smell here is heavy and complex, a mix of damp earth, wet wool from your uniform, a hint of chloride lime used to disinfect, and less pleasant odors that never really go away. There's the sour tang of old sweat and unwashed bodies, and a lingering whiff of something metallic from exploded shells long past. Somewhere further down the line, a faint stench of decay hangs in the air where fallen men lie unburied. But in this moment before daylight, everything feels strangely still. You are exhausted from another long night. Your eyelids are heavy, and every muscle in your body aches with fatigue. But you and your comrades know that dawn is a dangerous time. So an hour before first light, the word is quietly passed down the trench. Stand to. That means every soldier must be awake and at the ready, manning the fire step with rifle in hand, peering over the top of the trench into the murky gray light. This is the Army's routine, because experience has taught that the enemy might choose the early light of dawn to launch a surprise attack. So here you stand, boots sunk in cold mud, legs trembling slightly from the chill and from sheer tiredness, dutifully watching the eastern sky grow lighter. Your breath hisses softly as you exhale. Along the trench, you sense other men standing silently at their posts, each alone with his thoughts, as the night sky fades and the first pale hint of morning comes. As the pale sun finally edges over the broken landscape, a kind of routine returns to the trench. The stand to is over. No attack came this morning. You hear a quiet order pass down the line. Stand down. You finally allow yourself to relax your stiff shoulders and step off the fire step. There's a momentary lull now. Some of the men stretch or stamp their feet, trying to get blood circulating again after the long, cold vigil. A few share quiet nods or murmured words, wishing each other good morning in voices barely above a whisper. Any louder and you might draw enemy attention. Besides, no one has energy for chatter yet. In a little while, a welcome comfort comes around. The rum ration. An NCO carries a container with a precious few drams of spirit for each man. Your tin mug receives a small splash of dark rum, barely an ounce or two, just enough to warm your insides. You sip it slowly. It burns your throat and spreads a brief flush of heat through your body. Many soldiers look forward to this tiny daily ritual, a numbing nip of alcohol to help face another day. After that, if things are quiet, you might get a chance to brew some tea or coffee. You crouch in the trench and fumble with a small portable stove, shielding a match from the wind. When the little flame takes, you heat up some water in your blackened mess tin. The water isn't very clean. Water for the front lines often arrives in old gasoline cans, and it still carries a faint petroleum taste, but it's water nonetheless. You toss in a few tea leaves from a ration pack, or perhaps crumble in some grains of instant coffee. Soon you have a lukewarm tin mug of strong, bitter tea. It's not the best cup you've ever had. In fact, it tastes slightly of petrol and metal, but it's hot, and that is something. You nibble on a hard army biscuit from your haversack as you drink, or maybe a piece of cold, greasy bacon if any was sent up. The food is simple and unappetizing, often just these dry, tooth-breaking biscuits, a smear of plum and apple jam, or a tin of salty bully beef. If you're lucky, there might be a bit of canned stew with a couple of carrots and potatoes floating in it, or a little dab of golden treacle to sweeten your bread. Everything is usually cold by the time it reaches you. Still, you take whatever nourishment you can. Even bad food is fuel, and you'll need your strength. After this meager breakfast, the daily chores begin. Life in the trenches is not constant combat. Most days are spent maintaining your shabby, muddy home and taking care of basic duties. You take apart your rifle, carefully wiping the mud off the bolt and oiling the mechanism. Mud is everywhere, caking every tool and weapon, and a jammed rifle could mean death if a battle suddenly erupts. So you and your mates diligently clean your guns each morning. The sergeant might come by to inspect, running a finger along the barrel to ensure you've cleared the rust and dirt. You also check your bayonet, dull with dried mud, and give it a quick wipe. If time and water allow, you shave the stubble from your chin using a dull razor and whatever warmth you can find, sometimes heating a little water in a mess tin, other times just using cold water, or even the dregs of your tin of tea. It's a small act of normalcy to scrape your face clean, even in such conditions. Your uniform, however, is beyond cleaning. It's perpetually damp and stained, but you do your best to shake off any loose dirt and scrape away the worst of the mud. The buttons and buckles are tarnished greenish from constant wet. It's not about looking smart out here, but a clean rifle and a relatively dry uniform can prevent misery or even save your life. Next comes trench maintenance. In teams, you and the others fill sandbags to shore up sagging walls and replace bags torn by shell blasts. You might grab a shovel and help scoop out the thick sludge that has accumulated in the trench bottom, trying to clear the path so you're not wading knee-deep all day. Every trench has a sump pit or hole where water is supposed to collect. Someone takes the hand pump to try and suck water out from the trench floor, sending it through a hose over the parapet. It's slow, tedious work, and the water never really leaves. More seeps back in as soon as you turn away. If there's a section of duckboard, wooden slats laid down as a makeshift floor, you reposition it so the worst puddles can be stepped over. In colder months, some of that standing water freezes into a thin layer of ice that cracks under your boots. In warmer times, it's just a brown soup of foul-smelling mud. You might hammer a loose plank back into place, or drive a stake to reinforce a trench wall that's starting to crumble. In quieter parts of the line, there's also the latrine to take care of. Close to the front, going to the bathroom means either a precarious trip to a small dugout, designated for the purpose, or simply using a bucket or tin when things are urgent. One unpleasant morning task might be emptying those latrine buckets, or shoveling soil over waste in the pit to keep the smell down. There's no real privacy or comfort for such needs, just a corner shielded by a few dangling scraps of sandbag or a bent piece of corrugated iron. It's an unspoken understanding among the men to give each other as much space and grace as possible and not to make jokes at someone else's expense. Everyone is in the same humiliating situation. The acrid odor of human waste mingles with the other smells of trench life, adding another note to the overpowering stench that surrounds you. Once the essential chores are done, you might finally have a few minutes to yourself. By now, full daylight has arrived, though the sun is often a pale disk behind clouds. If you peer carefully over the trench parapet, just a quick glance over the sandbags, nothing more, you see a desolate landscape spreading out before you. It's a wasteland of mud, craters, and barbed wire. Broken tree stumps stick out of the earth like blackened bones. In the distance, perhaps the shattered remains of a farmhouse, or the shell-torn fringe of a once wooded copse, are visible through the morning mist. No sign of living trees or green fields, just churned barren no-man's land separating you from the enemy trenches somewhere out there. The world is colored in dull browns and grays under a leaden sky. It feels as if nature itself has died here, leaving only wreckage and silence. Down in your trench, though, life goes on in this narrow strip of earth that has become home. A couple of your comrades are trying to patch a leaky bit of trench wall with an old tarpaulin, wedging it into place with mud and boards. Another man is carefully cleaning a Lewis gun, a light machine gun, wiping dirt from its pan magazine. Two soldiers near you sit on a sandbag and quietly play a game of cards using a tattered, greasy deck that's been carried through many a battle. On a relatively calm day like this, after morning duties, there's often not much to do but wait. A few try to mend their uniforms or darn socks. Thread and needles are scarce, but a ripped seam or a hole in a sock won't fix itself, and any task is better than pure idleness. You might take out a letter from your pocket, one you received from home a few days ago via the field post, and read it again to pass the time. The paper is a little damp, and the pencil handwriting smudged in places, but seeing familiar words from a loved one brings a tiny warmth to your heart. Perhaps your mother wrote to say everyone is praying for your safety, or your sweetheart back home sent a few tender lines and promises to bake you a cake when you return. You hold those letters carefully, trying not to let the mud on your fingers blot the ink. For a few moments as you read and reread, your mind wanders away from the trench. You can almost smell home, fresh bread in the oven, grass after a summer rain, the linen of your own bed. It's a comforting daydream. If you have the energy, you might even write a reply. Propping a notebook on your knee, you pencil in some lines by the milky morning light that seeps into the trench. You choose your words carefully, trying to sound cheerful and reassuring. You don't want to worry them, so you leave out the worst parts of life here. You might thank your mother for the knitted socks she sent, even though they're already soaked and muddy. They were a blessing when fresh. Or tell your father you've put on weight, even if you've actually lost some from the poor rations. You mention that you're doing okay, that you're with good friends, and that you hope to be home on leave soon, if the army permits. You perhaps add how you miss the taste of your mother's cooking, or the feel of a warm fire on the hearth. But the truth of your daily life, the wet, the cold, the fear, you leave those details out. Those things are better kept among the soldiers here, only they can truly understand. As the morning wears on, you start to notice an all too familiar itching sensation spreading across your body. You scratch at your chest, then along your waist under your tunic, and pull your hand back with a grimace. You've caught a louse between your fingertips. It's a tiny off-white insect, but it might as well be a monster for all the misery it causes. Lice are the constant companions of every soldier in the trenches. No matter how often you try to wash or delouse your gear, your clothes are full of these little parasites that bite into your skin and drink your blood, leaving red, itching bumps. You crush the one you found. Its body pops with a small snap and flick it away. But you know there are dozens more you can't see, hiding in the seams of your shirt, in your woolen long johns, in the folds of the bedding. In quieter moments, some of the men take off their shirts and spend time chatting. That's the soldiers' wry slang for picking lice off each other, as if we were primates grooming in a zoo. A common trick is to hold a candle flame near the seams of your shirt or trousers to scorch the lice eggs that cluster there. You've done it yourself. You carefully pass a lit candle beneath the armpits of your shirt, along the inside seams of your pants, hearing the faint sizzle and pop of eggs and bugs frying. The smell of singed cloth and maybe a bit of burned hair wafts up, but it's worth it. It's a small victory in an endless war against vermin. Within a day or two, new lice will hatch and the itching will resume full force. Everyone is infested, and eventually most give up trying to eliminate them entirely. You can only fight to keep the irritation at bay. Some joke darkly that even if the enemy doesn't get you, the chats will. In fact, those bites aren't just annoying, they also spread disease. Many soldiers come down with a peculiar recurring sickness the doctors call trench fever, a high fever with headaches and shin pains that can put a man out of action for weeks. At first, the cause is a mystery, so on medical reports they just note PUO, pyrexia of unknown origin. Only later do they suspect the ubiquitous lice are to blame for this scourge. For now, though, trench fever is just one more hazard of the trenches. Men who get it are sent back behind the lines to recover, shaking and sweating, and the rest of us keep on scratching. As noon approaches, the sky brightens a bit, though often it's still cloudy. If there's any sun, it brings a touch of warmth to your portion of trench, and you turn your face up slightly to feel it on your skin. You settle down for a moment of rest. Your stomach gives a small rumble. Lunch will just be more of the same rations as the morning, perhaps another hard biscuit or two, and a bit of tinned bully beef, unless the cooks manage to send up something different. Sometimes they mix the beef with boiled potatoes to create a sort of hash, or we get a scoop of pea soup with a film of fat on top. You take a swallow of water from your canteen. It's flat and has a slight metallic or rubbery tang. The canvas and metal it's stored in lend their flavor, but at least it's wet. You find a relatively dry spot, perhaps an old ammunition crate or a pile of empty sandbags, and sit down, stretching your legs out as best you can in the cramped space. Maybe now you can close your eyes for a few minutes. Every bone in your body begs for sleep. Last night was yet another night of interruptions and anxiety, with only snatches of restless dozing, so any chance to catch up is welcome. You pull your coat tighter around you and tilt your helmet forward to cover your eyes, trying to get comfortable. Men doze wherever and whenever they can. You've seen fellows fall asleep standing up at their post from sheer exhaustion. In fact, you recall one freezing night when you yourself nodded off on sentry duty, still upright, until the jolt of your knees buckling woke you. Under military law, falling asleep at your post is a grave offense. In theory, it could even be punishable by death. But human bodies have limits that sometimes override orders. Here in the daytime lull, you hope to catch a brief nap, but the environment does not make it easy. At any moment, a sudden crack can shatter the relative calm. Crack. A rifle shot echoes down the trench. Your eyes snap open, and you tense automatically. You hear a faint curse from a nearby lookout. A German sniper across the way must have spotted some movement and taken a shot. You quickly check yourself. You're unhurt, and no one nearby is crying out, so likely it missed. But a few trenches over, a startled shout tells you someone might have been less fortunate. Perhaps a man who foolishly raised his head a touch too high, or someone exposing himself while repairing wire, has been hit. Snipers are a perpetual threat. All it takes is one careless moment above the parapet, and a hidden sharpshooter can end a life with a single squeeze of the trigger. So you learn to stay low, to move quietly, and to keep even your helmet below the trench edge, unless absolutely necessary. The helmet, your steel Brody helmet issued last year, protects you from shrapnel raining from above, but it won't stop a direct rifle bullet from the front. Just now, that crack might have been a round glancing off a metal periscope plate or smacking into the earthen wall. You hear no second shot, which means whoever was targeted has ducked out of sight or he can't duck anymore. The uncertainty lingers for a moment, but you force yourself to breathe slowly and let the adrenaline subside. This minor scare over, you try again to rest. You shift your position, leaning back against the damp trench wall. A rat suddenly skitters over your boot, bold as anything, as if it owns the place. You jerk your foot and make a face of disgust. The rat pauses a moment to look at you with beady black eyes, its whiskers twitching impudently. It's a large one, practically the size of a cat, its fur slick and dark from who knows what filth. Well fed too, the rats here grow frighteningly big with all the food and carrion available to them. This rat probably gorged on someone's leftover stew, or grimly on the unburied dead lying in no man's land. You shoo it away with a wave of your hand and a hiss, and it scurries a few feet down the trench and disappears behind some sandbags near a dugout timber. You know it will be back. There are countless rats infesting every trench. At night, you can feel them running across your legs or hear them squealing as they fight over scraps. They've been known to bite sleeping men's faces or hands. One of your friends woke up with a sharp pain and found a rat nibbling at his earlobe. Ever since, he sleeps with a scarf wrapped around his head as makeshift protection. The men try to deal with the rat problem in darkly humorous ways. You've seen soldiers set up a bit of bait, a crust of bread, or a bit of cheese on the end of a bayonet stuck in the mud, then lie in wait with a rifle. When a rat comes to investigate, bang, they blow it to pieces with one well-aimed shot. It's a small entertainment on especially dull evenings. In the moment, it feels satisfying to eliminate one of the scavengers, yet everyone knows it's futile. For every rat you kill, there are dozens more breeding out of sight and swarming through the shadows. So the rats persist, and you simply share the trench with them, however unsettling it may be. If the day remains militarily quiet, the afternoon might drag on with endless waiting. Waiting can be its own kind of agony. Time in the trenches often moves in peculiar ways, sometimes agonizingly slow, as you count the minutes until your next rest or meal, or the end of your turn on watch. Other times terrifyingly fast, when an enemy attack comes out of nowhere and chaos erupts in seconds. But on a day like today, it just crawls. You find yourself absent-mindedly doodling in a pocket notebook or fiddling with a stray piece of wood, perhaps carving a little shape into it with your knife. Some men get surprisingly creative. A few whittle fragments of broken shell casing or chalky trench clay to pass the time, making crude little souvenirs or tools. This improvised craftsmanship is often called trench art, a carved pipe, or a decorative letter opener engraved with names and dates. Creative distraction can soothe frayed nerves, if only for a short while. For instance, one of your mates has been patiently carving a ring from a piece of brass shell casing, polishing it smooth to send to his sweetheart when he gets the chance. Another spends idle minutes etching a design into his aluminum mess tin, or scratching the battalion's emblem onto a spent rifle cartridge with the tip of his bayonet. These bits of trench art are tiny acts of creativity and hope, bringing a touch of humanity into an inhuman place. Sometimes, the presence of animals provided a bit of comfort. Amid the misery, many units adopted stray dogs or cats as mascots. One scruffy little mutt, whom you and the lads named Jack, wandered into your trench one afternoon and never left. Jack would curl up at your feet during quiet nights, his warm body and gentle panting reminding you of home. He's become everyone's friend, trotting along the trench to visit each fire bay, gladly accepting scraps of food or a friendly pat on the head. In fact, one night, Jack's low growl gave early warning of an enemy raiding party crawling toward your wire. His alert probably saved lives, as the sentry heard it and sounded the alarm. There are also the carrier pigeons, kept in wicker crates at Company HQ. These birds are released with urgent messages tied to their legs whenever the field telephone lines are cut or runners can't get through. You've watched a pigeon soar up above the battlefield, flapping hard to gain height, and disappear over our rear lines, braving gunfire and splinters to deliver its note. Some are shot down by riflemen or even hawks, but many make it, and a few famous ones even saved entire units by bringing word for help just in time. Then there are the horses and mules, the unsung laborers of the front. At night you can hear them on the roads behind, hauling wagons of shells, food and water through the mud. These poor beasts often work to exhaustion, their ears pinned back and eyes rolling at the noise of nearby shellfire. You passed a dead horse on the way up to the line once, its body swollen and stiff in the ditch, a sight that wrenched your heart. These innocent creatures are caught up in the war with no say in the matter, and yet without them we couldn't get half the supplies we need to survive out here. Even cats play a role. Almost every trench has at least one or two cats to hunt the ever-present rats. You recall a small gray tabby that slinks through the dugouts in your sector, expertly catching rodents. The men joke that she earns her rations more honestly than any general. In a place largely devoid of normal life, these animals bring moments of joy and a sense of normalcy. Caring for them gives the soldiers something pure and living to focus on, and their loyalty and affection light up even the darkest days. Humor, dark as it often is, also helps you and your comrades cope. Soldiers develop a particular kind of wit in the trenches, ironic, dry, and sometimes macabre. You all take the bleak things in stride and find ways to laugh at them. For example, when the trench floods knee-deep during a rainstorm, someone might quip, "Well, boys, at least we have indoor swimming pools now," prompting weary chuckles. The food gets endless ribbing. You call the hard biscuits dog biscuits or tooth dullers, and refer to the tinned corned beef as bully beef, with a sarcastic affection. When a batch of tea arrives tasting strongly of petrol from being hauled in old fuel cans, a man will sip it and sigh, "Ah, just like Mother used to make." These jokes aren't truly funny anywhere else, but here they bring the slightest of smiles and lighten the unbearable reality just a touch. On quiet nights, someone might break into a song, not a rousing anthem, but a soft, nostalgic tune hummed under the breath. You've heard men softly singing, "Keep the home fires burning," or "It's a long way to Tipperary," as they clean their rifles or write letters, the melodies drifting through the still air. There's a sadness to it, but also a comfort. In those moments, you all feel like a bunch of homesick boys rather than hardened soldiers, and it reminds you exactly what you're fighting to return to. In rare moments, humanity peeked through the cracks of war. You recall the Christmas of 1914, when a spontaneous truce broke out in some parts of the front. On Christmas Eve that year, German voices started singing Stille Nacht, Silent Night, from their trenches, and some of your fellow soldiers softly joined in with the English lyrics. For once, the rifles and guns fell silent. By morning, a few brave souls on both sides had climbed out of their trenches and met in no man's land, shaking hands and exchanging holiday greetings. You watched in disbelief as enemies shared cigarettes and tins of beef, even showing each other family photos from wallets. Someone produced a football, and a little impromptu match started up on the frozen mud, laughter echoing where only gunfire had been before. It lasted only a short time, a day or two of peace and camaraderie, before orders came to resume the fighting, and everyone reluctantly returned to their own lines. But that memory stays with those who witnessed it, a shining reminder that even in the darkest times, human kindness can flicker to life. It was a brief glimpse of the world as it could be, in the midst of the world as it was. Many evenings, camaraderie and small kindnesses are what carry you through. When the night is calm, you and a couple of mates might sit together sharing a cigarette, passing it around in the dark. None of you speak much, you simply pass the smoke, each taking a drag and staring quietly at the glowing tip as it flares in the night. In that simple ritual, there's a bond. The glow lights each face momentarily, and you see not the dirt and weariness, but the understanding in each other's eyes. You might give one another a pat on the back, or just sit shoulder to shoulder in silence, and that's enough to convey what words can't, that you're in this together, and you're not alone. For some, a little touch of faith or superstition also helps. Many carry personal talismans, a cross or saint's medallion on a chain around the neck, a family photo tucked in a breast pocket over the heart, or a lucky coin hidden in a boot. Such tokens, along with quiet prayers murmured in the dark or before battle, help bolster courage and give a sense of protection. One friend of yours whispers the same brief prayer every single night, a simple "Lord, watch over us," before curling up to sleep. Another lad showed you a tiny horseshoe charm his mother gave him. He's convinced it's the reason he survived a shell blast that killed 2 others. Whether it's true or not, these small rituals and beliefs help maintain hope when rational thought sometimes fails. Despite all these coping methods, fear and stress are constant undercurrents. You've witnessed the toll on men's minds as well as bodies. There were those who snapped under an endless bombardment, reduced to trembling wrecks who had to be led away from the front, their eyes vacant and hands twitching. Shell shock, they call it. The doctors and officers are only beginning to understand it, and some don't understand at all. One day, you saw a fellow in your platoon, a solid, dependable chap who had been cheerful even in tough times, suddenly break down after a week of particularly intense shelling. We had been enduring a barrage for hours, and he was digging out a comrade buried by a shell when he uncovered the poor man's lifeless face in the mud. Something in him just gave way. That night, in the dugout, he couldn't stop shaking. He clamped his hands over his ears and curled up, rocking like a child, long after the shelling ceased. Come morning, he was incoherent, stuttering, flinching at every sound, tears streaming down his face. The officers sent him to the field ambulance station. We heard later he was in a hospital behind the lines, diagnosed with nervous exhaustion. We all understood any one of us might be next to reach our breaking point. The official treatment for shell shock varies. Some medical staff offer rest, kindness, and time away from the line, but others, especially early in the war, see it as cowardice or malingering and might even threaten punishment. A few unfortunates have been court-martialed when, in their dazed panic, they wandered away or refused orders. You thank your lucky stars that at least so far you've managed to hold it together. Perhaps it's numbness, perhaps it's just the grace of God, but you've found a way to get up each day and carry on, one foot in front of the other. Some men quietly talk about hoping for a blighty wound, an injury serious enough to get sent back to Blighty, slang for England, home but not so serious as to maim permanently. A clean gunshot through the arm or a nice bit of shrapnel in the shoulder might do. It's a desperate wish, and most only half mean it. You can't really choose your wound after all, and many who wish for a small one end up with something far worse. Still, in dark humor, a man with a minor injury might get congratulations like he'd won a prize, since he'll get a few weeks away from hell. There are also those who simply cannot continue. Though rarely spoken of above a whisper, a few soldiers have slipped away from the trench in the dead of night, or failed to report back after a working party, essentially trying to desert. Fear can push a man to extremes. The army doesn't tolerate it. If caught, deserters face courts-martial and potentially execution. You heard of one young lad from another regiment who wandered off for 2 days, hiding in an old barn until the military police found him. He was terrified and exhausted. At the end of his tether, they made an example of him. Rumor has it he was shot by a firing squad at dawn, with even his friends forced to witness. It sends a chill through everyone who hears the story. Officially, such things are hushed up. The Army reports might just say killed in action to his family, but we in the trenches sometimes learn the truth through the grapevine. It's a sobering thought that on top of all the danger from the enemy, a man also has to fear judgment from his own side if he falters. So even if someone feels near breaking, they usually grit their teeth and carry on, for the alternatives are grim. As the war grinds on and months turn into years, a question often gnaws at you: why? What is the point of all this suffering? In the early days, you believed in clear reasons, defending your homeland, standing up for Belgium's neutrality, doing your duty to king and country. But as the conflict bogged down into static trench slaughter, and as one bloody battle after another seemed to change nothing but the body count, you and many others started doubting the grand purpose. You hear rumors of advances or retreats on other parts of the front, of offensives with big names like the Somme or Passchendaele, but none of it seems to justify what you're going through for a few yards of blasted mud. The larger strategy is beyond your view. All you know is that each day is about surviving until night, and each night about surviving until morning. You capture a trench or a hill 1 week, only to lose it the next, and the ground between becomes littered with the corpses of both armies. The same patches of earth have been fought over so many times that they're nothing but churned muck full of broken weapons and bones. After witnessing enough futile attacks and countless deaths, many of you stop believing in any noble cause. Victory, to you now, is as simple as getting through the day alive, or making sure your mate does. What once might have been thoughts of glory or heroism have been utterly buried in the mud, replaced by the cold, pragmatic focus on survival and loyalty to the fellows beside you. There's a bitter joke among the men that on the Western Front you fight 3 enemies: the Germans, the weather, and the terrain itself. Often it feels like the weather and mud are harder to battle than the men in the opposite trench. Indeed, the very seasons seem arrayed against you. In winter, you freeze. Your breath hangs as ice crystals in the air. Your fingers go numb even inside gloves. Frost forms on your rifle at night. Many come down with trench foot, when wet, cold feet swell and turn blue-black. A few severe cases in the early days even needed amputations before we learned preventive care. In spring and autumn, it rains endlessly. The battlefield becomes a vast swamp of sticky mud. The trenches flood. Sometimes the walls collapse. You slog through knee-deep mire that sucks at your boots and leaves you soaked. In summer, you swelter under a brutal sun, unless you're in one of those wet Flanders summers where it still rains. Then you swelter and soak at once. If it's dry, the trenches fill with dust, and the stench of decay grows even more intense under the heat. Flies swarm any latrine or uncovered food. Clouds of them buzz around the garbage pits and the dead. You sweat through your uniform, and thirst becomes a real issue when water parties can't get through the shelling. Men can collapse from heat stroke, especially carrying heavy packs or trench mortar shells up communication trenches under a boiling sun. There's no escape from the elements here, no true shelter, only dugouts that are themselves damp ovens in summer or ice boxes in winter. Spring brings its own misery. The thaw and rain combine so the whole front turns into a sea of mud again, just as morale might have lifted with the first bird song. Birds. Yes, occasionally you see larks or sparrows fluttering overhead, and their singing is so out of place in this wasteland that it nearly breaks your heart. Summer does have beautiful dawns sometimes, The sky will turn pink and gold, and for a short while the air is still and almost fragrant. But then the day's bombardments begin, or the flies start pestering, and reality returns. The war persists through every season, grinding on, oblivious to the weather. You endure all of it as just another enemy to fight. For a long time, the routine of trench life continues like this for you, a strange cycle of boredom, misery, humor, terror, and heartbreak, day after day, night after night. But at some point, an order comes that will break the routine. Your unit is to take part in a major attack. Whispers spread along the trench days in advance. We're going over soon, or big push coming. You can feel the tension build. There's a mix of anxiety and, strangely, eagerness. Anything to break the stasis, anything to do something. The artillery bombardment, announcing it, begins in the early hours one day. Suddenly, all along your sector, the big guns behind the lines open up with a deafening roar. For hours, every heavy gun is firing shells at the enemy trenches opposite. The air is filled with an almost continuous rumble and the rushing sound of shells passing overhead. The ground under your feet trembles with each distant impact. You've been told this bombardment is meant to destroy the enemy's barbed wire and knock out their dugouts, to make your assault easier. So you cling to that hope. Maybe after all this thunderous preparation, you'll just walk over and take their positions with minimal resistance. On the morning of the attack, you stand at your fire step as usual for stand to, but now it's different. Now you know that when the time comes, you will not be standing down, but climbing out into that dreaded no man's land. The light is strange and flickering because the sky is streaked with smoke from the barrage and the occasional star shell. Your heart thumps so strongly you can feel it in your ears, or maybe that's the vibration of the guns. You've fixed your bayonet to your rifle. Its weight and gleam make your stomach churn. The platoon officer moves along the trench, giving final words of encouragement, or maybe just checking that every man is ready. Some fellows mutter a last prayer under their breath. Others kiss a photograph or a locket with shaking hands. You reach into your breast pocket and touch whatever memento you carry, perhaps that lucky coin or your sister's picture, and silently promise yourself you'll get back to see them again. 0 hour approaches. You've been told a precise time, perhaps 5:30 a.m., when there is enough light to see but still dim. You glance to your left and right. You see the pale, tense faces of your mates, each trying to be brave. That friend who joked about football now rubs a little charm on his wrist. Another lad is making the sign of the cross repeatedly. You swallow to moisten your dry throat. Somehow you feel both intensely alive and slightly disconnected, as if watching yourself from outside. The artillery barrage that has been raging begins to lift. That is, the shells start creeping forward to hit the area just beyond the enemy front line, forming a moving curtain of explosions intended to cover your advance. This is it. The company sergeant looks at his pocket watch, then up and down the trench. Finally, he yells out, 30 seconds. Your stomach flips. You take a deep breath and tighten your grip on your rifle. The trench is filled with a new sound. Officers blowing whistles, sharp and shrill. Wheat, wheat, the signal. The cry goes up. Over the top, lads. Forward. One by one, men begin clambering up ladders or over the parapet. You force yourself to move. Adrenaline surges and carries you up and out into the open. Immediately, your senses are overwhelmed. The open battlefield stretches before you under a now brightening sky. The cacophony of battle is immense. Although your artillery is now mostly focused deeper, enemy shells begin to whiz and crash around as they respond to your attack, and their machine guns, having weathered the bombardment, start hammering out bullets. You stick with your section, moving in a line. Training said walk, don't run. to keep formation, but that goes out the window. You find yourself trotting, half crouched. All around, figures in khaki are emerging from the earth like ants and advancing. No man's land, which you've only peeked at for months, is now your path. It's terrifying and surreal to be out here. The ground is cratered like the moon and strewn with barbed wire entanglements. You keep your head low and your eyes fixed ahead toward the enemy trench line, which is still a good distance away, across perhaps a few hundred yards of broken ground. The noise of rifle and machine gun fire grows louder, a staccato tat-tat-tat that punctuates the dull thunder of shellfire. Bullets whistle past, some snapping the air right by your ear with a sound like a giant whip. You realize with a shock that the enemy is not suppressed. They are firing back with everything they have. Men begin to drop around you. Just 10 paces to your left, a friend cries out and falls forward, kicking up mud. Your heart lurches, but you force yourself onward. Training and sheer survival instinct push you on. You can't stop, or you'll surely be hit next. You find yourself running now, breath ragged. Boom! An enemy mortar shell explodes not far to your right, spraying soil and shrapnel. You feel a sting in your thigh, but it's superficial, a tiny fragment perhaps. You keep running. There's a section of German barbed wire ahead of you that, to your horror, looks mostly intact. The bombardment hadn't cut it fully. Men are bunching up, trying to find a way through. In this moment of hesitation, the German machine guns find their range. The air is filled with a hideous buzzing and ripping sound as they sweep the area. You see a line of men in front of the wire go down almost in unison, like marionettes whose strings were cut. Some scream, many lie still. The path forward is blocked by coils of rusty barbed wire that weren't destroyed. You turn slightly, following others toward what looks like a partial gap where a shell might have blown the wire apart. Bodies of earlier waves of attackers already litter the approach to this gap. Your boots slip in the slick mud, and you nearly trip over a fallen comrade. You recognize him in a flash. It's the lad who shared that cigarette with you last night. He's lying face up, eyes open to the sky, a neat red bullet hole in his forehead. There's no time to react. You mutter a breathless God help us, and push on. As you scramble through the wire at the gap, tearing your uniform on the barbs in the process, you notice with a mix of relief and terror that you're actually quite close to the enemy trench now, only maybe 50 yards more. The German front line is in chaos. Your artillery did hit it hard, and parts of their parapet are blown in. Smoke drifts everywhere, making your eyes water. You can see figures moving down in their trench, and flashes of rifles being fired at you from their fire step. There's a furious rattle of a machine gun to your left somewhere, and another to the right. Bullets kick up dirt at your feet. How you haven't been hit yet is pure luck. With a final, gut-churning effort, you and a handful of men reach the enemy trench. A couple of your grenades are already missing from your belt. You realize you hurled them toward the trench moments earlier, almost without thinking, just as you'd practiced. You don't know if they found a target, but one explosion sends a shower of splinters and earth into the air ahead of you, so perhaps they struck home. You let out something between a shout and a gasp and jump down into the trench, bayonet first. The next minutes are a blur of terror, noise, and fierce struggle. A German soldier is directly in front of you as you land, a young man, helmet askew with wide, frightened eyes. He lunges at you with his bayonet. You parry with your rifle, and out of sheer reflex drive your own bayonet forward. It slides into him, a strange, muffled feeling as it goes in, not at all like one imagines, and his face contorts in pain. You rip it back out, and he collapses at your feet. It's happened in an instant. You barely have time to register the enormity of what you've just done, because another figure comes at you through the smoke-filled trench. This time it's two of your mates who intercept him, one clubbing the German with the butt of his rifle, while the other thrusts with his bayonet. You step over a tangle of bodies. Half the time you don't know who is friend or foe in these seconds, and push forward. Your platoon is in a section of the enemy trench now, perhaps 20 yards of it, and you fight desperately to clear it. Grenades explode down the line with deafening bangs. Men shout and curse and stab. It's primal, brutal chaos. The smell is of smoke, soil, and an eye-watering sharpness of explosives. One of your comrades is slumped against the trench wall, quietly moaning with a gut wound. An enemy soldier lies face down at the bottom of the trench. Unmoving, another German raises his hands in surrender, yelling "Comrade." One of your corporals roughly pulls his rifle away and shoves him toward the rear, telling him to sit tight if he wants to live. Suddenly, as quickly as it began, this little spasm of violence is over. You find yourself alive and in control of a fragment of the German front line. Your chest heaves as you catch your breath. You're dazed by the adrenaline, ears ringing from the close quarters explosions. You quickly check over your body. A few scratches, nothing serious. By some miracle, you're largely unharmed. Around you are the survivors from your company who made it this far, maybe a dozen or so men. One is vomiting in a corner out of shock. Another is hastily reloading his rifle with trembling hands. The plan was for reinforcements to follow and extend this gain, but as you peer over the parapet back toward our original lines, your heart sinks. The field between here and our trench is now a hellscape of craters and still figures. The attack, at least in this section, seems to have faltered. Only a few small groups like yours managed to reach the enemy trench, and now you're essentially isolated. Already, you hear shouts in German down the line, and you sense movement beyond a bend. They are gathering for a counterattack to evict you. Your officer, blood oozing from a cut on his scalp, quickly assesses the situation and gives the order, "Fall back while we still can." Part of you rebels at the thought of yielding the hard-won ground, but there's no choice. Staying with so few men against an entire enemy line would be suicide. So reluctantly, you scramble out of the captured trench, hauling yourself and a wounded pal who can still hobble back up into the open. Bullets start snapping again as soon as the Germans realize some of you are retreating. You run in a crouch, mud flying with each step. There's no formation now. It's each man finding his way back as best as possible, making for shell holes and whatever cover can be found. Your lungs burn as you sprint and stagger over the cratered landscape. At one point, you trip over barbed wire and tumble into a water-filled shell hole. Gasping, you scramble out, drenched and panicked. You pass the body of a British soldier lying half in a shell crater, and then another. The German trench behind you comes alive with muzzle flashes and angry fire. They're firing on you from behind now. A bullet catches the man running a few yards to your right. He cries out and goes down hard, rolling. You grit your teeth and keep moving. You can't help him now, and stopping would only get you killed. At last, the torn landscape yields ahead to the familiar torn sandbags of your own front line. Friendly shouts reach your ears. "Come on, get in, get in." Hands reach up and grab you by the arms, pulling you bodily back into the safety of your trench. You collapse onto the duckboards, utterly spent, chest heaving. Someone gives you a slap on the back. "You're all right, son. You're back." You nod numbly, hardly able to speak. For a long moment after the fighting dies down, an eerie silence hangs over the trench. Your ears are still ringing from the blasts, and in that high-pitched hush you realize you can hear things that were drowned out moments before: the rapid thump of your own heartbeat, the drip of water from a shattered canteen nearby. Men exchange stunned glances but few words. It's as if the world itself is catching its breath, shocked at the carnage. That heavy silence is broken only by the distant cries of wounded men out in no man's land, and the low, urgent commands of officers trying to reorganize our defenses. even those sounds feel muffled, almost gentle, after the cacophony we just lived through. You find yourself whispering when you need to speak, as though in respect for the dead and in awe of the fact that you're still here. Once it's obvious the attack is over, reality sinks in hard. The company sergeant begins taking roll call in our trench, his voice grim. Name after name is called into the smoky air, and so many get no answer. With each silence, one of us has to mutter a response, killed or wounded. I saw him by the wire, or missing. The list seems endless, and every unanswered name is another weight on your heart. There were about 120 men in your company this morning. By sundown, only perhaps 40 stand to answer roll. The survivors are spattered with mud, many with blood, their own or others. Some stare hollowly at nothing, others quietly shed tears as the reality hits. The sergeant's voice breaks slightly as he reaches the end of the list. It's a somber, heart-wrenching ritual, the living confirming the dead. Not long after, as dusk starts to creep in, stretcher bearers from both sides venture out under a temporary ceasefire flag to retrieve the wounded crying between the lines. You peer cautiously over the parapet and see them, small teams of men in 2s and 3s, carrying stretchers or simply supporting limping figures. It's a surreal calm after the storm. The groans of injured men echo across the shattered field, a haunting sound. Some wounded have been lying there for hours and are only now getting attention. You and a few others climb out as well, under the watchful eye of both sides. No one fires during these brief truces. You work with muddy hands to gently lift a comrade who is unconscious but miraculously still breathing, placing him on a stretcher. As you carry him back to our trench, he awakens momentarily and cries out for his mother. You whisper something, you're not sure what, maybe just "it's all right, we've got you," as reassuringly as you can. It's heartbreaking. Earlier, in the immediate aftermath of battle, you scrambled out to gather whatever and whoever you could from the field. Later that night, when darkness fully envelops the land, you and a few volunteers steal back into no man's land to recover any remaining fallen. With stretchers and a couple of hooded lanterns, whose light you keep low, you crawl from crater to crater. Your heart pounds with fear that a stray shot might ring out, but the enemy seems content to let us be for now. You locate fallen comrades by listening for faint moans or by glimpsing a still form in the mud when a flare goes up. Whenever possible, you and the others gently lift your comrades onto stretchers or even just carry them in improvised tarpaulin slings to bring them back to our lines. No one wants to leave a friend out there if it can be helped. For those you cannot retrieve under the enemy's watch, perhaps those lying too close to their wire, you remove their identity discs and any personal items that might identify them, whispering a promise that you'll come back for them later if you can. It's grim, dangerous work, illuminated only by the fitful, ghostly glow of flares and the dim light of your shuttered lantern. You step around bodies of friend and foe alike. Occasionally you come upon someone from the other side still alive, and you call out for their medics to come tend to them. Humanity isn't entirely dead in these moments. While you're out there, you also gather weapons and equipment that might be salvageable. An abandoned Lewis gun here, a crate of unused grenades there. The army will clean and reissue whatever it can. In this war of attrition, nothing can go to waste, not even the gear of fallen soldiers. And quietly, practically, the men take boots off the dead. It feels morbid and wrong, but it's necessary. Many of us have boots with soles coming apart or large holes letting in water, and new boots are slow to arrive. So, as gently as you can, you unlace the boots of a fallen comrade and take them. You try not to think about it too much, focusing on the fact that he won't need them anymore, and you will, to march, to keep your own feet dry and healthy. Still, as you later sit in the trench and pull those boots onto your feet, you feel a heavy responsibility. These boots carried him through his journey, and now they will carry you through yours. You silently tell yourself you'll walk in his boots with the same courage he had, and in that way honor him. It's a strange exchange, the dead supporting the living in a literal sense. Such is the nature of life in the trenches. When the night finally falls completely after the failed attack, you and your comrades, battered and grieving, try to process what happened. In one afternoon, your company has been devastated. The mood is unlike any you've felt before, a hollow, numbed sorrow. Some men sit on the fire step, heads in hands, not speaking. Others furiously write in their journals or scribble letters, as if to reassure themselves they're still alive. The chaplain comes around and murmurs prayers with small clusters of men, giving what comfort he can. By the light of a few candles and lanterns, you participate in the grim task of saying goodbye to those you lost. A shallow mass grave is dug behind the lines, in a quiet corner of a support trench or a shell hole just beyond a traverse. Under the cover of darkness, for even funerals can draw enemy fire if done by day, you help carry the bodies that were retrieved. You lay them gently in the earth. There's no time or supplies for coffins. Each man is wrapped in his ground sheet or blanket. Before the graves are closed, you make sure to collect each man's personal effects, the things that will be sent home to their families. Letters, photographs, identification tags, a watch or a ring, small items soaked in mud and blood, but precious to those awaiting news. In one pocket, you find a half-finished letter addressed to my dearest Mary. In another, a tiny Bible with a mother's note on the inside cover. Handling these items feels like a sacred responsibility. You wipe them as clean as you can and wrap them carefully. You know that soon enough, an official telegram will reach their loved ones back home, and afterward these last keepsakes will be delivered. It breaks your heart to imagine the scene, a mother or wife opening a package to find a beloved one's mud-stained letter, or a locket that still carries a trace of trench dirt. But you take solace in knowing that at least the families will have something tangible of their son or husband, proof that he was here, and that in his final days he cherished thoughts of home. Under a starry night sky, a few of you gather as the chaplain says a brief prayer over the grave. The words ashes to ashes, dust to dust have never felt more literal as clumps of damp earth are shoveled over the blanketed forms. You all stand, helmets in hand, heads bowed. Some soldiers quietly weep, tears finally coming now that the adrenaline has faded. Others stand rigid, jaws clenched, eyes shining, but refusing to cry, whether out of pride or shock. You murmur a final goodbye under your breath to each friend, now buried, promising you won't forget them. Then the grave is filled in and roughly marked with makeshift wooden crosses tied together from ration box wood. In the darkness, the crosses cast thin shadows by lantern light. There are no bugles, no salutes here at the front. Those honors are for ceremonies far away. Here, it's just a few exhausted men saying farewell in whispers. When the last shovel of dirt is patted down, the chaplain makes a slow sign of the cross. The group disperses quietly, each back to his section of trench. The next day, as if nothing has changed, the routines of trench life resume. Dawn comes and stand to is performed with bleary eyes. A mail delivery arrives, and ironically there are letters for some who died the day before. A comrade gently tucks those letters away. They'll be returned to sender or given to next of kin. Reinforcements arrive by the afternoon. A draft of new soldiers, some fresh-faced boys of 18 or 19 who look at you with a mix of admiration and fear. You realize with a start that to them you are the seasoned veteran now. In a way, you have become one of the older soldiers, hardened and changed, even though you might be only 20 or 21 yourself. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a shard of a broken mirror someone hung on a post. The face that stares back is almost unrecognizable. Your cheeks are gaunt and smeared with dirt. There are fine lines at the corners of your eyes, and a hardness in your expression that was never there before. The eyes themselves look haunted, distant, as if they've seen far too much. You touch your face and remember the enthusiastic, rosy-cheeked youth who marched off to war not so long ago. That boy seems like a stranger now. The new recruits pepper you with questions in the following days when the officers aren't around. What's it really like, mate? Is it true about the rats as big as cats? Think the war will be over by Christmas? You answer as gently and honestly as you can without scaring them witless. You demonstrate how to keep a rifle action clean in the wet, how to listen for the peculiar whiz and plop that means a trench mortar bomb is coming, and how to duck if you hear it. They soak up the knowledge. You notice how their hands tremble the first time the enemy sends a salvo of shells their way. You remember your own first days and realize just how much you've adapted since then. It's something like pity you feel for them, knowing they have their own baptism of fire ahead, and there's only so much you can do to help. Despite all the horrors, life isn't uniformly bleak. There are still small moments of levity, of human warmth that shine through. Perhaps one quiet evening, you get word that you and a few others are granted a few days of home leave. It's been more than a year since you last saw home. You can hardly believe it's true until you're handed official papers and find yourself in a railway station behind the lines, boarding a train heading west. It feels surreal, the rumbling of the train wheels, the scenery of rural France passing by, intact villages and ordinary civilian life continuing as if in another world. When you arrive in England and then step onto the platform of your hometown station, it's like entering a dream. Family rushes to greet you, your mother's tears, your father's firm handshake hiding his emotion, siblings hovering, unsure whether to hug you or treat you like fragile glass. They notice how thin you've become, how your hair is shaved short, and your uniform rumpled, how there's mud ingrained in your pooties and a distant look in your eyes when you drift off. They fuss over you wonderfully. A hot bath is drawn, your first real bath in ages. You soak until the water is nearly black with trench grime. A hearty meal is prepared. You have to remind yourself to slow down as you devour fresh bread, roasted meat with real herbs, buttered vegetables, flavors almost forgotten. That night, you slip into a real bed with clean sheets. It's so soft, and the silence is so complete that you actually find it hard to fall asleep. You're used to the constant background noise of the front, the distant guns, the snores and shuffles of dozens of men nearby, the wind over the parapet. Here, in your old bedroom, it's almost eerily quiet. You lie there staring at the ceiling in the dim light, feeling like a stranger in a familiar land. Over the next few days of leave, you experience a mix of joy and alienation. It's wonderful to be home, to see that the places you grew up in are still here. The church, the market square, the pub on the corner, all untouched by shells or barbed wire. But you also feel oddly out of place. People ask you how it is out there. If they're casual acquaintances, you smile and give a vague, "Oh, not too bad, we're managing." If they really press, you mention missing proper tea or wishing it rained less in Flanders. You certainly don't talk about scrambling over the dead or wiping blood off your bayonet. It's not that you're hiding it, it's just that you know they could never fully understand, and perhaps you're glad they don't. They have their own wartime hardships, shortages, worry, maybe lost loved ones, but it's a world apart from the trenches. On one afternoon, you take a walk by yourself out into the fields near your home. It's early summer, and the hedgerows are green and full of birdsong. The sky is a peaceful blue with fluffy white clouds. You find a spot under an oak tree you used to climb as a boy and sit down. For a moment, You close your eyes and just listen. A brook bubbling nearby, a cow lowing in the distance, the breeze stirring the leaves. No gunfire, no cries. You find tears on your cheeks that you didn't even realize were coming. It's as if you'd forgotten the world could be like this. All too soon, your leave is up. The night before you depart, your mother slips a small parcel into your kit bag, filled with homemade cake and knitted socks and a tiny vial of holy water. For luck, she says, trying to smile. At the train station, your family waves their tearful goodbyes. You wave back from the window of the carriage until you can't see them anymore, imprinting their faces in your memory for comfort in the days ahead. Returning to the front after leave is jarring. The journey feels like traveling to a different planet, one slipping back into hell. When you rejoin your unit, some of your old mates are gone, either casualties or on leave themselves, replaced by fresh faces. But after the initial melancholy of return, you slip back into the routines. It's strange how quickly the soldier's life becomes normal again. Within hours, you're once more crouched in the trench, helmet on, scanning the horizon for movement, as if your peaceful interlude at home was a dream. Part of you is deeply grateful for having had that time away, that glimpse of normalcy. Another part of you almost wishes you hadn't, because now you know exactly what you're missing, and it makes the trenches seem that much more unbearable, yet you carry on. The war drags into late 1917, then 1918. You survive more bouts of fighting, each one leaving new scars on your unit. You witness acts of incredible bravery, a stretcher bearer risking his life under fire to reach a wounded man, a corporal single-handedly rushing a machine gun post in a do-or-die attack and actually silencing it with grenades. You also witness moments of heartbreak, a beloved lieutenant, gentle and kind, killed by a sniper while checking on his men, an entire company from your brigade virtually wiped out in a gas attack because the wind shifted at the worst possible time. Ah yes, gas, we mentioned the chlorine cloud earlier, but by 1918 the enemy and we too have employed new kinds. The worst is mustard gas, used first in 17. Unlike the sharp immediate choke of chlorine or phosgene, mustard gas is an oily vapor that you might not even know you inhaled until hours later when your lungs begin to burn and your eyes swell shut. It also burns any skin it contacts, raising blisters the size of boils. You yourself got a mild whiff of it once when a shell landed nearby. That night your throat felt raw and you developed blisters on your wrists where some gas must have snuck past your cuffs. The blisters hurt like the devil and took weeks to heal. Others weren't so lucky. You saw men with their entire faces burned, eyes blind, skin sloughing off. After that first experience, you became almost obsessive about keeping your mask at the ready, even sleeping with it on your chest like a teddy bear. And so it goes. Your company gets rotated to quieter sectors sometimes, or even pulled out for rest behind the lines. Those periods are something like paradise compared to the front. You march a few miles back to a village or camp, and there you get hot meals, maybe a bath and delousing, and a proper sleep in a barn on straw. You might even have a chance to visit a YMCA hut for tea and biscuits, or watch a concert party of military performers put on a comedy show with silly skits and songs. How you and your mates roar with laughter at the most juvenile jokes. It's such a release to laugh without fear for an hour. But inevitably, you go back up to the line again. The pattern repeats, nights of watchfulness and dread, days of mud and toil. By now you're one of the old hands. New recruits instinctively huddle near you, trusting your experience. You guide them as best you can, even as you quietly wonder how long your luck will hold. You've seen enough to know that fate is capricious. The shell that misses you today might take you tomorrow. The difference between walking away from a battle or lying dead in the wire often comes down to a few feet or a split second. It's both humbling and horrifying. After a while, you stop second-guessing it. A sort of fatalism sets in. You will survive until you don't. All you can do is do your duty and hope. Finally, after years of bloodshed, something shifts on the grand scale. The enemy powers start to crack. Maybe it's the strain of blockade and attrition. Maybe the arrival of fresh American troops tips the balance. Maybe it's internal troubles. You just catch snippets of news, but you sense the German army weakening by late 1918. There's shellfire lessons. You notice many of their soldiers now are younger and less aggressive than the ones you faced in 1915. One day in early November, rumors race along the trenches that an armistice, a ceasefire, is on the way. Many don't dare believe it, but on the morning of November 11th, 1918, at exactly 11 o'clock, the guns fall silent. Suddenly, astonishingly, the war just stops. You and your comrades stand in your trench, looking at each other in disbelief. Some cheer weakly, others are too exhausted or numb to react. You peek over the top, across the torn expanse of no man's land. You see German soldiers standing on their parapet, waving or raising their helmets in the air. The weight that lifts off your chest is indescribable. It's over. It's really over. There is no final charge, no grand victory parade here at the front, just an eerie quiet and a collective sigh of relief mixed with sorrow. The surviving soldiers on both sides share cigarettes that afternoon, meeting halfway across the lines without fear. You trade cap badges and addresses with a fellow from Bavaria who not long ago would have shot you on sight. It's bewildering but heartening to find that, once the fighting stops, you're not so different after all. In the days that follow, you help pack up equipment, fill in portions of trench, and prepare to march out. There's a ceremony where your battalion commander thanks everyone and pays tribute to the fallen. He tries to find noble words for what was essentially 4 years of slaughter and stalemate. You stand at attention, thinking of those friends who didn't live to see this moment. When they play God Save the King on a scratchy gramophone, you and the others join in, some voices cracking with emotion. Then, just like that, you shoulder your pack and begin the march away from the front. You're going home for good. When you finally arrive back on British soil, there are crowds and celebrations. Bands play, flags wave, people throw flowers. You're swept up in a victory parade down your hometown's main street. They call you heroes, saviors of the nation. You force a smile and wave, but inside you feel a hollowness. For you, victory isn't about glory, it's about absence. It's about those empty places where your friends should be standing, about the young men who will never grow old. Back at home, life beckons to resume. But you find that the war isn't something you can just shed like an old coat. It clings to you in memories, in nightmares. In the quiet of peacetime nights, you sometimes jolt awake, imagining you hear a shell coming or a trench wall caving in. At first, loud noises make you flinch. A car backfiring sends your heart racing, and fireworks on Guy Fawkes Night leave you trembling in a cold sweat. But gradually, month by month, the normal world reasserts itself. You find work or go back to a trade. You smile again. You even laugh, though you feel guilty at first for doing so. People around you, aside from fellow veterans, will never fully grasp what you went through out there. And honestly, you're glad they don't. You wouldn't wish that understanding on anyone. Years pass. The war that was supposed to end all wars fades into history for the new generation. Monuments are built in towns and villages with long lists of names carved in stone, names of your friends, your comrades. On each anniversary of the armistice, you gather with others at the memorial in your village, wearing your medals on your chest. There's an old reverend who says prayers, and a bugler who plays the last post. As the mournful notes ring out, you bow your head and close your eyes. In that silence, You can almost see them, the boys with whom you shared biscuits and jokes and muddy holes in the ground. Young, strong, full of life, forever young now. When the ceremony ends, people thank you for your service. You nod politely, but you never quite know what to say. How can you explain that the true heroes, to you, are the ones who never came home, who never had the chance to stand here in a suit and hear thanks? Decades later, you find yourself an old man. Perhaps you're sitting by a cozy fireside, a blanket over your knees. Children or grandchildren at your feet look up at you with curiosity when the war is mentioned in their school lessons. You sometimes share a mild story or two about how awful the food was, or how you and your best mate rigged a brew of tea using an old tin and some ingenuity in the trenches. They giggle and you smile. They don't see the faraway look that enters your eyes as you recall in private the things you choose not to say aloud. The mud that felt like quicksand swallowing lives. The nights listening to wounded men cry in no man's land because you couldn't reach them. The moment you bayoneted that enemy soldier and realized with horror he was probably no older than 17. Those memories still visit you in dreams sometimes, but with time they have dulled at the edges, like old photos fading. One quiet evening, you step outside and look at the sunset. The sky is streaked with peaceful pinks and oranges. A gentle breeze ruffles the leaves in the trees. You close your eyes and hear for a brief moment an echo of that silent moment in the trenches at dawn, long ago. In your mind, you whisper a few names, the names of friends who didn't live to see this gentle sky. Maybe you speak to them inwardly. We made it, mates, we made it out. A bird sings on a nearby branch, and you take that as their reply. Feel the weight of your body sinking into your bed now, as though the heavy burdens of that distant soldier's journey are finally being set down. Imagine the weary soldier at last finding a soft, clean bed like yours, closing his eyes in tranquility. In this quiet moment, across time, you share the peace that he longed for. Breathe in deeply, and as you breathe out, let go of any tension, any lingering echoes of the trenches. They are in the past, and you are here, safe and warm. Honor those memories by embracing the comfort around you, the softness of your pillow, the warmth of your blanket, the stillness of the night. These gentle blessings are what they dreamed of. You can let your mind drift now, perhaps picturing a calm field at sunrise, or a silent starlit sky over gentle hills, scenes of peace replacing scenes of war. As your eyelids grow heavy, know that you carry the gratitude of remembering those who came before, and with that gratitude comes deep relaxation. You have done enough for today. There is no more marching, no more noise, only the quiet hush of a world at peace, lulling you to a well-deserved sleep. Thank you for coming on this long, quiet journey with me. Close your eyes and rest now. You're far away from those muddy trenches. You're warm and safe. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach. Now, let the heaviness of sleep wash over you. Imagine the last embers of this story glowing softly and then dimming out, like the lights in a trench as night falls and silence gently takes over. You are here, in your own bed, at peace. The world around you is calm. No matter how distant and dark that history was, it's behind us now. All that's left is to learn from it, to cherish the peace that was won at so high a price, and to carry those lessons gently in our hearts as we drift into slumber. Good night and sleep well.